it's starting soon. People from Open Robotics, do you guys have access to edit? I think that you should have access to edit. Feel free to edit directly instead of suggesting.
Mine is only suggest.
Really? Okay, I'll fix this after the meeting. I thought I had given everybody inside the organization permission to edit. So let's get started. Wow, we have 26 people here. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people that I don't know. Looking forward to meeting you all. A lot of people who I haven't seen in a long time. So let's get started. Welcome to our first community meeting for the simulation team at Open Robotics. So this is the general agenda that we're going to follow today. Feel free, everybody's welcome to add items to the bottom here and others. This is all very experimental. It's the first time that we're doing this. We're taking suggestions on the format. You know, if people have suggestions on how to improve, how to change it, we're all ears. The idea of these meetings is to be a communication channel between the development team at Open Robotics and the community, people who are both consuming the Ignition libraries and looking forward to contributing to Ignition and Gazebo and the simulation ecosystem that we maintain at Open Robotics. So the point is to be like useful to people outside of Open Robotics to know what's going on, know our roadmap, what's coming up, give their opinions, things like that. At any point, feel free to like speak up, unmute your microphone, add comments, make questions. This is all very it's meant to be very participative. I don't expect to be talking for a whole hour here. Any questions so far about like the goal of these meetings? I think I should also set up like expectations. I don't expect these meetings to be about solving technical issues, like getting into a lot of implementation details or anything like this, because this like a lot of different people with different interests is usually not the best group to do that. Yeah, and I also don't expect this to be like a place for people to just add to-do items for Open Robotics to work on, because we don't have infinite resources. So it's mainly a way for us to communicate. Maybe people from outside Open Robotics can pick up some tasks. Maybe we can identify some things that are missing that Open Robotics can work on. But you know, it's not going to be just like come here, ask for something, and it's gonna get done. So if someone thinks that that's gonna happen, that's not. Sorry. Okay, that's enough for an introduction. So I wanted to start with some announcements, and this is not supposed to be just announcements from Open Robotics. If there are other people out there who want to announce their own projects and you know, things they're working on, things that they released, feel free to bring it up. But for now, there are 2 items here from Open Robotics that I wanted to announce to everybody in case you guys are interested. One is that we did our 4th major release last week, which is called Ignition Dome. So that's available for Linux and Mac. We have a lot of tutorials. We have some, there's a t-shirt campaign going on. If you are into t-shirts, there's still time to get yours. So that's our latest development. We are working now on the next Ignition release, which is going to be Ignition Edifice, scheduled to be released in March 2021. Dome is not an LTS. It's going to be supported for a year only, a bit more than a year. And Edifice is also not a long-term release. The Ignition F that comes after Edifice will be a long-term release. So the latest LTS that we have right now is Citadel. And another thing that I wanted to let people know is that we're participating in Hacktoberfest. For people who are not familiar, Hacktoberfest is this event that happens every October on GitHub. And you can, like if you open 4 pull requests, you get a t-shirt. Now there are some extra like conditions for you to get your T-shirt. I think the pull request has to be merged or at least approved for you to get the T-shirt, but you can open for pull requests. And we are a participating organization. So if you're looking forward to making your first contribution, we're going to make an effort to be reviewing pull requests and answering questions if people have any. Any questions about the announcements so far? We're good? Okay, so moving on to the next item, which is going to be the big focus of today's meeting. We've been getting a lot of questions from people outside of Open Robotics about how they can contribute, how can they be more aware of the releases that we're making, what's coming up, our roadmap. So I thought that for this first meeting, it would be helpful for us to talk a little bit about our development process, and this should be helpful even for people who are who want to consume the Ignition libraries and for people who want to help contribute back to the Ignition library. So I hope to make this useful. Again, if there are questions along the way, feel free to speak up, interrupt me. This is not a monologue. You guys can speak up and ask questions for clarification as I'm speaking. Does that sound good? I hope not to speak for a whole 30 minutes about this. So towards the end, we can also have some questions specifically focused about this.
Louise, this is Matt Hansen, hi. Can I interrupt for just 1 second? So you mentioned Dome before, and I didn't jump in at the time, but I do have a question about Dome, and we don't have to necessarily answer it here, but is there somewhere that you're going to give a release announcement? I think you said there wasn't one officially yet, but at some point I'd kind of like to understand what the features currently available in Dome are and what the delta between Citadel and Dome was. So we don't have to go into it in depth here or anything. I just kind of wanted to know, how to find that at least.
Yeah, so thank you, Matt, for asking. We did make an announcement. It's in our the Open Robotics blog. So Dome release, Ignition Dome released. Here, I can put the link on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jose.
Misunderstood you then. Yeah, I thought you said that it was released, but there was no announcement yet. So maybe that was my mistake.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I speak fast, and sometimes I just. Yeah, there's an announcement here, and I'm also, as I go over some of our documentation, I'm going to show you guys where you can find out where we're keeping things up to date with the features that are available in every release.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive into what's there today and kind of the direction it's going and stuff. So anyway, all right, go ahead, continue. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I think this is going to be helpful to you. I hope to answer a lot of questions here. So jumping in, so these are the resources that I thought that I would cover with everybody now and just walk over the documentation that we have because I realize that sometimes it's not so obvious where to find things. So let's jump into this first link here, the entry point of the Ignition documentation, which is this page here. This should be your main location to find information about what we are developing and what's going on. We have a lot of information here about our future roadmap, what the release features the features that were already released in other releases, releases that we have planned, how to contribute, and here on the side we have information specific to each one of the releases that are already out or that we are working on. So you can see that they're in alphabetical order. Acropolis is already end of life. We're still supporting Blueprint for a little bit longer. The Citadel is the LTS. Dome was released last week, and Edifice is the one that we are working on, planned for March. And here on the side, you have a list of all of the libraries. And if you click on these links, you can see documentation specific to each one of those libraries. Because maybe I should mention this for people who are not aware, Ignition is a collection of several libraries that they work together to build a simulator, Ignition Gazebo, which is the next generation of Gazebo, the good old Gazebo that we all know. But each library can also be used on their own, and our goal is really to make these libraries useful outside of Gazebo. So they all have like their own documentation page that you can follow just if you're interested in just that part. So for example, if you're just interested in rendering for your own applications, you can just go directly here and you can forget everything about the Gazebo simulator and so on, like if you just want to use the transport layer or things like that. So this is your entry point for all the documentation. So I was planning to start talking about the releases page, which is this one. This is just where you can find the information about the dates of past releases, when they are going to EOL, so they are not going to be supported anymore, and when we're planning the next releases to come. So Edifice is the one we're currently working on. It's planned for March 2021. And as I said, Ignition F is going to come after that, and that's going to be our next LTS. We are trying to align with Ubuntu's LTSs. So Citadel is targeting Focal mainly, and Ignition F is going to target the next Ubuntu LTS after that, so we can stay in sync. And then there's some more information here about the naming scheme and so on. But if we go here to release features, we can see the information about each one of the releases. So maybe that answers your question, Matt, about what's new in each one of the releases. So starting with Acropolis, which is already end of life, you can see all of the features that were introduced in this release. And what's important to know is that whatever is introduced in one release is available in all releases after that. So there's Acropolis here, and then it comes Blueprint with more features, a lot more features, and then Citadel, and then Dome down here with what was added in Dome. Another thing important to notice here is the versions of each one of the libraries. So for each one of these big named releases, we have we pin a major version of each one of the Ignition libraries. So you can see here which ones there are, for example, for Acropolis. And since we're following semantic versioning, the major version of these libraries is guaranteed to be API and ABI compatible. So whenever you're using, for example, if you're just using the Acropolis libraries, all of them, they're going to be compatible amongst each other, and they are going to be API and ABI stable for that major version. So we may make new minor and patch releases, but they are not going to break any existing functionality. So you can really build on top of that and rely on those releases. And you can see that sometimes the same version of a library is used across multiple collections or multiple releases. So for example, if you see Ignition CMake has version 2 on Acropolis, and it also has version 2 on Blueprint, and it also has version 2 on Citadel, just because we didn't really need to break anything between these releases. So we just keep the same major version. But for other libraries, for example, Ignition Gazebo, which is the one of the Leaf packages that we have, for every release, we pretty much need to add breaking functionality, and we bump that major version. So you'll see that Blueprint is using Ignition Gazebo 2, Citadel is using Ignition Gazebo 3, and so on. So hopefully this clarifies a little bit how what's the relationship between the major releases and the libraries that are inside those releases, and how the libraries work across releases. So for example, like you will never have a lower version of a library in a future release. You're never going to have, Ignition Gazebo is never going to be like version 2 on a future like Edifice, for example, right? It's always going to go up and add more features like that. Another thing important to, yeah, go ahead.
So can I ask another question here? Thank you. This is helpful. So I guess, just as someone who's kind of new to Ignition, like been using Gazebo for years, what's your guys' current recommendation on use of Ignition versus Gazebo? Should people be moving over to Ignition like now, or is it not quite ready, not quite feature parity yet with Gazebo? I mean, I guess I just want to hear kind of like your high-level recommendations on that.
Yeah, so I'll go over, we have a page here with a feature comparison between Gazebo Classic and Ignition Gazebo. So you can take a look at that. And our recommendation is if the features that you need are all already in Ignition, we encourage you to migrate, because Ignition is where we're going to be adding new features. It's where we're doing active development.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense. You're more, I think you're just more and more support mode for Gazebo at this point. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So we still support Gazebo. Gazebo 11 will be supported until 2025. We will be adding like bug fixes and minor features to that as needed. But the bulk of our development is going into Ignition. And like no breaking features can ever go into Gazebo Classic, because we're not planning to make a Gazebo 12 release, right? That's the current plan. So in 2020, if you have a project that is going to span beyond 2025, it's important for you to consider moving to Ignition.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I think, yeah, when you show that table, I think that will definitely help too. So I'll hold my questions till then.
Okay, no, that's good. What is Peter saying? Oh yeah, the Allison's comparison document is also very helpful for like, she focuses on a lot of like physics features. The link that Peter just posted there on the chat. Okay, so any questions about the release features page that we're looking at right now? Another thing that I should mention, because this is not obvious and that's not how every project works, but our style of development, we add non-breaking features to already released versions and all the time. So for example, we have Blueprint, and this list here is not fixed at the time that Blueprint is first released. We keep adding features to it as long as they are backwards compatible and there is a low risk that they are going to break existing functionality. So for example, it may look right now that Dome doesn't have anything really new with respect to Citadel, but we are going to keep adding features here as long as they don't break. And anything breaking goes to Edifice. And anything that can go, that is compatible even with Citadel, we're going to add that to Citadel, then forward port it to Dome, forward port it to Edifice, and keep forward porting it. So if you lock into a release, for example, if you decide today I want to stick with Citadel, it's the LTS, and you have this set of features from Citadel, but we could add more features, and you're going to receive all the patch and minor releases that will come into Citadel. So that's something important to explain. So that's it for the release features. Let's go to our roadmap, which is this link here. So while the release features page was showing you what's already there, this shows what we're working on and we're planning for the future releases. So on the top here, we have our quarterly roadmap, which is basically the focus that Open Robotics is planning to work on for the next quarter. So this quarter just ended, so we have to update this. But what we were working from July to September was improving migration strategies from Gazebo Classic to Ignition. So we added a lot of compatibility between SDF files for them to work on Gazebo and on Ignition. We also added more C++ APIs that make it easier for you to migrate from Gazebo to Ignition. By no means this is complete, right? Like migration is not super seamless right now. There's still a lot that needs to be changed in your code and a lot that needs to be adapted. But the idea is to make that easier, and we made a big push between July and September. We also made a big push in documentation. This documentation website that you're looking at, we have all of the API pages as well. We have tutorials for all of the libraries. So we also made a big push for our documentation in the past 3 months. And now starting this month, our internal focus is to improve cross-platform compatibility. So Ignition right now is well-tested, well-used on Ubuntu, but not so much on Mac and Windows. And we really want to close the gap between all the three platforms. Mac is very close. Most of the stack works on Mac, but Windows, it's still like only the lower libraries really work on Windows, and we have to put some effort into making the higher libraries work on Windows. And the goal is that by the end of this year, we'll get much closer to feature parity between all the three platforms. Another thing that we're working on is feature parity with Gazebo Classic. So we are porting more features from Gazebo Classic, and the goal is really to port features that are preventing people from migrating from Gazebo Classic to Ignition. So really the most popular features that you're really missing in Ignition, we're planning to migrate those. And for this, like, it would be really helpful to hear from the community what you guys think is missing. So we have like the list of open tickets here with this specific close the gap label that we assigned to them. There are 53 open issues. If there are features that you are missing in Ignition that were available in Gazebo Classic, please open tickets on our repositories on GitHub, so we are aware that people want those features. If there are tickets here that you were really missing, like, give it a thumbs up, comment with your use case. This really helps us direct our development and really make it easier for people to migrate from Gazebo Classic to Ignition as soon as possible. So that's our internal focus. And in parallel to this, we're working on several other projects, and we have other features coming up as well. So you can see here features that we are planning for each one of the releases. And as I told before, we push features even to older releases very often. So for example, we're planning to add some features to Blueprint still. There are some features that we're targeting at Citadel, at Dome, and some things that we'll be breaking and that we will need to push into Edifice. So we are pushing them there. So this is a very high-level idea. We try to keep this up to date, but we often, there are little things here and there that we are always working on that may not make this list. So if you really want to see what we are actively working on right now, there is a link to our development board somewhere here. No, but I have it here on the document. So this is our development board that the team uses, and like all of our development is all done on GitHub. All the tracking is done on GitHub. Everything is public. So if you want to peek into what we're doing at any time, it's all here in this board. And when I go over the contribution page soon, I'm going to explain in detail what's the process with this board. Because even as external contributors, this board is important to you to see how your own contributions will move through this and how they will get to be merged and released. Any questions about the roadmap? Yeah.
No, it's not really about roadmap again, but it is about kind of overall architecture. So you've broken things out into lots of libraries, and your goal, you said, is to make it so that these libraries are, kind of independent, which is good. You're loosely coupling and all of that. That's great. Do you have anything like a diagram that kind of shows an overall stack of how it all fits together?
We don't. There is an open issue about adding a diagram because that's a question that we often get. But yeah, we don't have one right now.
I will mess up that I have been lazy and have not done that yet. But thanks for the push.
Okay, yeah, I'll go find that issue and I'll give it a thumbs up or a +1 or whatever to try to boost up the priority of that.
Yeah, by all means. And it's Hacktoberfest if you're so inclined to create some diagrams and open a pull request with a diagram. I know it's hard. I'm just joking.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My name is Isaac. I am trying to come back to Gazebo Ignition world from a few years hiatus. So I'm new to Ignition. What's interesting to me was, maybe I should show myself. What's interesting to me personally was that the contrast of the 5 years long-term support for Gazebo, the last release, and only 1 year LTS support for Ignition, even for LTS. What was the decision, especially for keeping the 5 years long-term support for Gazebo? Because it makes sense for example, it makes sense to me for the ROS 1 support, the final release of ROS 1 to be supported longer, because there are a lot of people who are actually building application on top of that version. But is that the same situation in Gazebo?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I completely understand your question. Like, so Gazebo 11 is going to be supported until 2025, and Ignition Citadel is also a 5-year support. So the Ignition LTSs are also 5 years, just
Oh,
like
sorry,
Gazebo.
I was wrong.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, so this is the support, and it's basically matching Ubuntu Focal. So that's the idea, and the idea for having a 5-year really like support for Gazebo 11 is just like you said, it's to give people time to transition from Gazebo to Ignition. So we really expect that over like until 2025, Ignition is more and more mature and more has better feature parity with Gazebo. So before then, way before then, people can just like safely migrate.
Hey, Louise, it's Sam from AWS here. On that note, do you recommend people on Gazebo 9 to use Gazebo, to migrate to Gazebo 11 or to Citadel Ignition?
It really depends on your use case, right? Like I was saying before, if you already have a bunch of plugins, a bunch of environments built on top of Gazebo Classic, migrating to Gazebo 11 from Gazebo 9 is going to be much more seamless than migrating to Ignition. So if you it really depends on like if you're planning to, for example, use some of Ignition's new features, then you could start looking into Ignition. If all the features you need are already in Ignition, you can start looking into Ignition, but the migration process will be much more complicated. So that's something that you need to be prepared for.
Yep, noted. Cool, thanks.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to go over on this page is the contributing page for people who are looking forward to contributing. We have here a lot of guidelines, a lot of support links to help guide people through their contributions, the list of all the libraries, the separation of concerns between all of them. Contribution is not just opening pull requests, like ticketing issues is also very helpful for us. So we show here how to report bugs. One thing that we should mention always is that like the difference between bugs and technical questions. So we do have the Gazebo Answers website for people to ask technical questions that they may have. And so, if you're having some Ignition trouble, by all means, please ask questions here on this website. But if you find a bug and you're sure it's a bug and you know how to reproduce, by all means, please ticket bugs on our GitHub repositories. Another way to contribute is to suggest enhancements, right? Like there's a feature that you really want, but you don't know how to implement, and you really want to see it inside Ignition. So, we also tell you here, like what's a good way to suggest future features. And for this, one good pointer is the community forum, which is a good place to discuss high-level ideas, right? So if you have a high-level proposal that is not like necessarily a technical question, you just want to discuss the direction of like how to implement something or whether something is valuable for the project, this is a good place to start that conversation with the rest of the community and to see if other people are also interested in that and if there are any conflicts with other people's use cases, for example. So this is a good place to bring that. Yep.
I just want to jump in for a second maybe and talk about so I personally, I think it's maybe a little confusing or like spreading out of the community, having like Gazebo Answers and Gazebo Community. I'm not sure how you guys are planning to manage those, but like in my experience, Gazebo Answers is it's okay, but it's not super actively used, and I feel like it would do better if there were more people answering. There's plenty of people asking questions, and that maybe adding Gazebo Community is like possibly going to make this situation worse. I don't know.
This is a very valid concern. So yeah, this is also a call for help. Hey, people, if you understand Gazebo, please answer questions on Gazebo Answers, because there is a lot of people needing help, and we just can't handle everything, right? But yeah, the separation between Gazebo Answers and Gazebo Community is pretty much like the same one as Raw's Answer and Raw's Discourse, for example. Gazebo Community came from when we terminated our mailing list. So we had a mailing list, and that was just so 1995. So we migrated to a website, a forum where people can discuss these high-level ideas. And it's stuff sometimes that people go with technical questions to Gazebo Community, but that's not the point there. That's more for a back and forth, like announcements and communications, which don't really fit into Gazebo Answers, right? We wouldn't do a release announcement on Gazebo Answers. But there is a lot of overlap. There is like, we could just do announcements on the OSRF blog, which we do, and then we link from Gazebo Community. So I agree that there are some fuzzy lines there for sure. If you have suggestions on how to improve that.
Well, I don't know. I'm not like a professional community leader, and I agree that these things are hard. And like honestly, Ross has the same problem, right? Like Ross Answers is not, it's no Stack Overflow, like it's okay, but most answers are 5 years old, and having the separate discourse is like, I get that obviously you need a place for announcements, and it's good for that. So yeah, unfortunately, maybe I don't have any great suggestions. Like, I'm not familiar with the Gazebo Community forum. Is that website, that type of system, not suitable for Gazebo Answers? Obviously, the other way around doesn't work, but like, could you maybe only use Gazebo Community? Is that possible?
That's very valid, and I've seen other projects. So Gazebo Community is built on Discourse, which is the same platform that Raw's Discourse uses. And I've seen other projects, open source projects, that use that for their questions and answers. I think at this point, like, we have so much already in Gazebo Answers that we have to think carefully about the migration strategy and how not to let all that content die, right? But that's a possibility.
Yeah, there is definitely some good stuff on Gazebo Answers, and I don't know how the migration might be totally impossible, but yeah, I don't know. That's maybe something worth considering.
Louise, when you saw this in other places, did they just have a questions and answers category, or then everything would just go into that one group?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head which project I saw. I don't remember if it was 3JS or there are some open source projects that do use Discourse for this kind of question and answer. And I think that they put it in a separate category so it doesn't spam people, right? Because one of the concerns is that if you're only interested in announcements, you don't want to see every technical question from everybody using the software. So it puts more effort into the users to tweak their settings and see what they are signed up for.
We could, hi everybody, this is Carlos. We could consider leave Gazebo Answers as it is, but if we want, use Gazebo Community for just ignition, questions, answers. That's a thing to consider.
That could be a good migration point if we decide to go with community to make the split like that.
Yeah, and maybe another point to consider when comparing the platforms is like the search and findability capabilities. Like, is there is it, because I know searching in Gazebo Answers is, it's okay, but I usually go through Google, right? So, but is Raw's Discourse, is searching with Google to find stuff on Raw's Discourse, does that work well or worse? What about searching on Raw's Discourse specifically? I think like discoverability, like the answer may be there somewhere, but how easy it is to find it may differ between the two platforms, and that might be something to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point. My experience with searching on the Discourse platform is much better than on Answers. I do the same as you. I use Google to find something on Gazebo Answers. Yeah, which works. I mean, at least it works.
Just adding a point to that, the different domains makes a little bit things more difficult. So there's a gazebo.com, a gazebosim.com, and then there's what is it? Ignition. Sorry, I don't remember, but there is a domain for Ignition. So if I Google, I have to type in both domain in order to search the right answer that I want. So I'm just saying.
No, that's valid. Yeah, we've had this conversation internally, and one of the things that we stumbled upon is the fact that sometimes you may be, if you're looking for an Ignition Gazebo question, it may not be helpful for you to see all the Gazebo Classic answers. So keeping the separation could be helpful for people who are searching. But we agree that there's some work that we can do to direct people from the gazebosim.org sites to the ignitionrobotics.org sites better. And I should point out that the community and questions and answers are gazebosim.org. And we're planning to keep them like this for Ignition as well. So community gazebosim.org, answers gazebosim.org. I know that it's small for you guys there, but I can't zoom in on the search bar, on the bar there, on the top.
Luis, do we have on the Ignition Robotics page, for example, is there somewhere on that website that just has a list of all of these resources available? So, for example, a link to Gazebo Answers, one to Gazebo Community, or do we kind of assume that people just know they exist somehow and haven't committed to memory? Because maybe it would be nice to have a reference if there isn't one already.
That's a good point. On gazebosim.org, we have those links right on the front page, but on Ignition, we don't. And maybe we should. Is someone taking notes? This is being recorded. We can always rewatch to remember all of the nice requests that you guys are making. Okay, so let me move forward a little bit. So I went over everything that we have on the docs. Other resources that I wanted to point out were our GitHub org, where you'll find all of the libraries. So just an entry point there. If you're searching for something, it's good to search on the entire org if you're not sure if it's in a specific repository or not. So this is where all of the libraries are. I already talked about answers and community. And finally, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is our development board. And this is on our, actually, I didn't finish talking about the contribution, and that's where I didn't end up here. Let me open this again. So contributing. Yeah, that's where it stopped. So, okay. We know how to ask technical questions. We know where to ask bigger questions. We have here some guidelines on how to contribute code itself, things like code style, how to run tests, and things like this if you're interested in opening pull requests. And then this part here that I wanted to make sure that we covered, which is our development board and the process that we go over as a team over this board. So all of these repositories here are being tracked on that GitHub board. And also, we are making sure that we don't forget some things that are in other organizations. So, for example, SD Format is in the OSRF organization. Gazebo Classics code base is on the OSRF organization, and we're still tracking that and reviewing pull requests and tracking issues and so on. And some of our tooling is also in other organizations, and we are making sure that we track them on that board. So here there is an explanation of each one of the columns. So let's take a look at the board together. So basically, all of the issues opened in the Ignition Robotics org end up in this inbox, and the team at the simulation team at Open Robotics looks at every single issue and pull request that is coming in, and we decide what to do with it. If we decided something that, if it's a pull request and we're going to review it, we move it to review. We usually assign someone as a reviewer. If it's an issue that is we think it's very important to fix straight away, and it doesn't look like the person who ticketed the issue is going to fix it themselves, we usually assign it to someone internally and move it to to-do or in progress and so on. And if it's issues that we think are valuable, but we are not going to have the resources to work on them, we usually mark them with help wanted and take them out of this board. So everything that is on this board are things that we are actively planning to work on. So this inbox, we try to keep it as short as possible. In our Monday meetings every week, we triage as much as we can. Then things in to do are things that we are planning to work on, or that we know that someone in the community, some collaborator is planning to work on. And then in progress are things that are being worked on, and in review are pull requests that are open and being reviewed. And once things are merged or closed, they're moved to the done column. And every Monday, the team goes over the done column. We take a look back at what was done that week, and we clear this column. So that's why it has only 20 things here. These are 20 things that were done this week. So why that's important to external collaborators? Your tickets that you ticket are going to end up in this inbox, and we are going to look at them. And then if you open pull requests, they are going to come and make this path from to do to in progress to in review and to done. So that's what you can expect. We are not making any promises to review pull requests as fast as we can, so to merge pull requests really fast, solve issues very fast. This is just the process that it goes through, but each one of these columns could take from a couple hours to a couple weeks, depending on the complexity of the issue. So it really depends. We really try our best to do to review things quickly, but we are also resource constrained. That's all I had for this meeting. So if people have more questions about our development process, how to contribute, things like that, how to consume the library's releases. Oh, I didn't go over the comparison page. Yeah. Matt, did you want to say something?
Well, we can come back to my question. Why don't you go over the comparison page, because I did want to see that. So I think
I'll do that. So here in Docs, if you go to each one of releases, each one has their own comparison page to Gazebo 11. So we can take a look at DOM, for example. Here on the side, feature comparison. So here you can see the comparison from Gazebo 11 to Ignition DOM. And there's the same for Citadel and Blueprint. So it's separated by category. So you have, for example, here all of the sensors. We are trying to open issues for all of the ones that are not ported yet, so people can comment and vote and express their need for specific things. So for example, we don't have a GPS on Ignition Gazebo yet, and if you would like that, you can click on this issue and comment there and express that you were interested in this, or even that you're interested in contributing that. Then there are here some SD format features, so things like height maps and polylines and so on. There are specific plugins that we shipped with Gazebo Classic, and this doesn't have so many issues, mainly because some of these we're not even sure if it's worth migrating or not. If there are things here that you guys would want to see on Ignition, please open an issue. I should mention that all of these pages have this edit button here that takes you to GitHub, so you can edit our tutorials and open pull requests and make changes to them very easily. So here's a list of plugins that were in Ignition, that were in Gazebo and are in Ignition. Some of them have some explanations on how, what's the new approach. Very short explanation. Sometimes maybe we should have more detailed documentation. So world plugins, sensor plugins, visual plugins, GUI features. Down here, all of the different widgets and graphical interface functionality that was available on Gazebo Classic. Physics engine support. So on Ignition we have support for Dart, but we don't have support for ODE or Bullet or Symbody like Gazebo Classic had yet. But we do have other physics engines, and we have the support for any custom engine plugin that you may be interested in integrating. The same thing with rendering. Gazebo Ignition has more rendering, support for more rendering engines than Gazebo Classic had. We support at least two, which is Ogre 1 and 2. We support a little bit of optics. Then there is information about the ROS integration. And this is not updated. DOM should be Foxy. unrolling. Then, yeah, so this page here is where you should find all of the information about differences. And if you go to, for example, the Citadel, you'll see some things may be slightly different. And the same goes for Blueprint. For example, if you search for DOM, you'll see here that like plotting on the Citadel page says it's available from DOM, but it's not. We're not going to backport that to Citadel. So if you need plotting, you will need to use Ignition DOM or something older. Does that answer your questions about comparison, Matt?
Yeah, this is good. I'll need to go through it in more detail, you know, on my own offline, which I'll do that. I did have a question scrolling down to the rendering and the physics engines. So as I understand it, you've kind of designed those as like a plug-in type architecture, and so it should be extendable, right? And you can add additional, like, you know, for example, you don't have the ODE engine yet. So I'm assuming there's some, abstract base class or something that implements an API, or I mean that defines the API, and then you can create a wrapper around the engine to meet that API or something. Is there any documentation at all on, like, say someone did want to take on adding the ODE engine? Like, is there any kind of like how to, you know, map to this interface or anything, or is it just like go look at the header files, or anyway?
Yeah, so let me show you guys the library specific documentation. So if you go here to libraries and you see the list of libraries, and you pick one, for example, physics, and you click on API and tutorials, and then you go to tutorials, you can see tutorials is specific to that library. And we are actively right now adding tutorials for Ignition Physics. We have an intern with Google Season of Docs. So his work is just to add like physics tutorials and make it easier for people to create their own physics plugins and understand how to use Ignition Physics as a user. So there's actively work going on here. But, you know, there is already this page that is there about like giving a high level
Okay,
overview.
yeah, this is great. Yeah, I wasn't aware of this. So if someone wanted to add their own plugin, this is where they would go to get started. Okay,
Yeah.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't have the equivalent for rendering yet, but that's also something that we're working on. Yeah, go Carlos.
I was going to say, answering Matt's question, that maybe another interesting resource for you might be to look into how TPE is implemented. TPE was done in-house. TPE stands for Trivial Physics Engine, so it's a relatively simple approach. And you can see how this is integrated into Ignition Physics.
I'm not saying I'm going to sign up to do this, by the way. I was just trying to understand if, you know, someone was going to take on something like that, how would they, where would they start? So this is very helpful in that now I see that you do have some documentation here, some tutorials, so that's good. And I assume you have similar things for like the rendering engines as well.
Yeah, we're working on like John just added a demo on how to add a custom rendering engine this week. I think the pull request was merged yesterday, or is going to be merged this week. So there is active work going on into that as well, like adding examples and documentation.
Okay, good. Thank you.
If we have time, Louise, I've got a question as a follow-up to that. In the roadmap, is there anything that Open Robotics are working on for improving the rendering, or is it the idea is to make it self-service so other people can add their own renderers if they want?
So we add rendering features to Ignition rendering, and then other libraries like other plugins can implement them. And we try to maintain the Ogre 1 and Ogre 2 with support for those features. I don't know if Ian would like to add anything about that.
Yeah, so we do actively work on new features. For example, the latest one, we added particle support to Ogre 2, but not Ogre 1 yet. That's something we may work on later. And right now is mainly driven by our projects and clients. So that's where we direct our resources to in terms of rendering features implementation. As for custom rendering engines, is something that we're actively working on to support. I wouldn't say there's a lot of documentation yet, but there's an example done by John recently. But that's something we'll have to improve.
Thanks, Ian. And so for the foreseeable future, there could be new features added, but in so much as they'll have to exist in Ogre 2.x for Ignition to take advantage of it.
At the point, yeah, right, Ian?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and is there so I haven't looked at Ogre for a while. I was digging around. 2.3 just got announced a month ago or whatever. Is there intent to sort of track to the latest Ogres, or are you sort of happy sitting on 2.1 for the next versions of Ignition Renderer?
So I've been keeping an eye on the features of Ogre, because generally, because Ogre 2.1 has been in development for so long, 4 or 5 years, and they finally made a release. And then now they're making another release. So it's really hard for me to see if it's still stable or not. So I have to keep an eye on it and see how stable it is. And I have to try out first before we migrate.
Yeah, cool. That makes good sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. I wanted to make sure that we address the agenda items that were added down here. So is David here, who added this item to the agenda?
Yeah.
Hello. So go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. What I was going to ask was, I've been trying to write some plugin for free card program. So I wanted to make robot models from there and export them to Gazebo. I haven't tried Ignition yet, but what I've seen is in the XDF formatting, we need to supply lots of parameters like center of mass, inertia, and others. So what I was guessing was like those parameters are generated from can be generated from the mesh, and maybe a material type if it is supplied, maybe a density, so that exporting models from CAD can be simpler.
Yeah, I can take that question. So if I understand correctly, you're looking for a way to like for Gazebo to automatically deduce like center of mass, lots of physical properties just directly from a mesh, right? That's a feature that is not there on Gazebo Classic or on Ignition yet. We don't have any plan to work on this. We have some tutorials on how you could use external tools to do this. Like we have a tutorial on how you can use MeshLab to deduce data a little bit from the meshes, but we don't have any plans to add that feature to Gazebo or Ignition yet. Pull requests are welcome though if you have an idea of how to do that. Yeah, what Peter said is right. The model editor has that for simple shapes. So if you add a cylinder in the model editor and you say, I want it to be of wood material, it will automatically calculate the mass and the inertia for you, but not for custom meshes.
I think there is functionality in Ignition Math to compute the volume of a mesh shape. And that,
yeah, that's true.
you assume a uniform density, you could get the, well, that'd be your first starting point.
Yep. So we have 4 minutes left. Sam, you're up. your questions
Yes,
about the
we
roadmap.
covered a bit of it. Yeah, we covered a bit of it before with Ian. I shortcutted the agenda items. I think that was enough. I think Ian gave me enough information there. It's with the Ogre support, it's like how much are they working on that? It sounds like Open Robotics are not contributing to it, so you're sort of depending on what happens with the Ogre itself. It's something the custom render is interesting to us, but I haven't dug into it deep enough there. So yeah, I think Ian gave me enough of an answer. So thank you.
Can I get a super quick question? So ROS 2, Gazebo Classic, Ignition. What's going to be like the magic combination? Like I assume, so right now I'm on Noetic with Gazebo Classic of ROS 1. So like obviously there's a mess of like which versions you could use, but like is there going to be a like happy place where we get like a new LTS of Ignition and a new LTS of ROS 2 and everyone's just going to go for it? Is that the hope? So
yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Singularity. Sorry to jump in, Louise. If you don't mind, I can try taking this one. That's going to be hard to answer, mostly because the time at which a person may want to use both ROS 2, let's say ROS 2 and Ignition, really depends on your project requirements. We are both projects are moving in the direction of achieving at least feature parity, and both projects have new unique features that the previous version didn't have. So really, I know it feels like a cop-out, like it depends on the project, but you can look at anecdotes of people that are using ROS 2 and people that are using Ignition as guides to indicate when you might want to jump onto one or both. So those projects, you can find them on the Open Robotics website, and there's a lot of discussions on the community boards in terms of who's using what.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess that was sort of an impossible question. So maybe a simpler one would be like, is there going to be more focus on more effort from OSRF on integration between ROS 2 and Ignition Gazebo compared to, like, how does that integration compare to what was previously developed for Gazebo Classic and ROS 1? Is that something you guys know about yet?
You mean in terms of maintaining a set of plugins that allows Gazebo to run and be used by ROS developers, that type of thing?
Yeah, like basically the Gazebo ROS packages thing, right? Like that offered some level of interoperability, but certainly didn't give you, didn't give you all of Gazebo. There was lots of things that were still only available if you used Gazebo Transport and wrote Gazebo plugins. So like, how is that story going to change at all with the new pairing?
Right now, I believe we're focused mostly on supporting the ROS IGN bridge as the method of integrating Ignition with ROS. One of the situations we ran into with the ROS plugins from Gazebo Classic days was that we'd get into feature disparity between what were in those plugins and what was actually in the Gazebo package itself, which led to some confusion and maintenance burdens. So our goal has been to try and push simulation features into the simulator itself and leave features that are unique and necessary for ROS in the ROS code base. So it's a moving target. We'll see how it goes, but that's kind of where we want to draw the line at this point.
So that would mean not maintaining a separate repository of ROS intended plugins for Ignition Gazebo. Is that what that would entail?
At this point, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so we're out of time here. I don't want to keep everybody. I know some of us have other meetings coming up right now. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we're trying to keep these meetings monthly. So we're going to plan another one for November. So keep an eye on Gazebo community for the announcement of the next meeting. And if you have any topics that you want us to focus on in the coming meetings, like please also like mention them on Gazebo community so we can be sure to focus and prepare to talk about them and answer your questions. This month's focus was the development process. Next month is not decided yet. We're all ears. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Please, thanks.